Welcome back and welcome to our media panel. Good morning, Brian Edwards. Welcome back from Italy.
Thank you.
And broadcaster Susan Wood, welcome along to you as well. Let's begin with a story that's caused an uproar in Australia and was broken by New Zealand journalist Jonathan Marshall, who's based in Sydney. Let's have a listen to some comments made by the broadcaster Alan Jones.
Are inveterate and compulsive liars. And they'll lie and lie like every person in the caucus of the Labor Party knows that Julia Gillard's a liar. Everybody. I'll cover that in a moment. The old man must be died 2 weeks ago. Shame.
Alan Jones there suggesting that Julia Gillard's father had died of shame as a result of the lies that Alan Jones suggests she makes. Pretty extraordinary comments, weren't they, Susan?
I can't imagine saying it, and what's more, I can't imagine even thinking that. It is just so vicious, so vile. It's in a whole league of his own. For a guy like Alan Jones, I mean, he's got a history. He talked a few weeks earlier about throwing her in a chuff bag and putting her out to sea. He's the man that had criticised an Aboriginal winning Australian of the Year. He's got a real history of this sort of thing. But, you know, I would ask, when does sort of shock jockery turn into hate speech? And I would say he's right on the line there.
Brian Edwards, what do you make of his comments?
Well, I think the term shock jock expresses it all. I mean, that's what he's paid for. You know, he's getting $5 million a year to do that, to push all the boundaries of decency and taste, to be as offensive as possible, and that garners him a huge audience. One of the fascinating things about this is that the audience at the event, when he said those things, loved it. They absolutely loved it. And since it's happened, Australians, by the thousand, have been coming to his defence. So that in itself is in some ways even more frightening than what he actually said.
Yeah, but 100,000 Australians, or even more, have signed an online petition against it, organised by a student. So there is also that other side of it.
That's
there.
Good.
And what is interesting, I think I got 45 advertisers and sponsors have abandoned his radio show. Now, he's got the big numbers, 2GB in Australia. He owns about 25% of the company that owns that station. It'll be costing them a lot of money at the moment. I'm not thinking the advertisers will go for long. They'll all be looking at each other going, well, if you go back, I'll go back, sort of thing. But it's certainly going to have some sort of monetary cost in the short term for the programme.
But they need one another. There's a mutual need there. The advertisers need him, he needs the advertisers. So I think they eventually will come back. One of the fascinating things about these shock jocks is they're all men. That's the first thing. They're all men. Mostly they're middle-aged, menopausal men who behave like this. And their currency really is the disaffected person, the person who's unhappy with their life, unhappy with the world around them. And his job is to find scapegoats for that, to blame various people. And this happens all over the place. All men and all right-wingers, by the way. That's another. There are no left-wing shock jocks.
OK. Let's have a look at, or have a listen to what another shock jock had to say too out of Australia. This comment was made by Darren Hinch.
Darren, let's talk about Alan Jones and this rather low blow
just repulsive
to Julia Gillard. Yeah, it was.
But I've gone on Twitter and I know I've called him a bitter old queen, and people said I shouldn't have done that. But what he did was just disgraceful. Now,
that's a shock jock reacting to a shock jock and now attacking his sexuality.
Bitter old queen.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I like it.
But Darren Hinch has got a heart. Can I say, I know he's done some outrageous things in his career, but he's generally sort of attacking the priests who have been made to be fiddling with kids. Or he's a guy with a heart, and I don't think he's, I mean, yes, attacking sexuality is not very cool, but I actually think Darren is a completely different sort of character to a guy like Alan Jones.
The interesting thing is that I don't believe, with the possible exception of Michael Laws, that we have any shock jocks of this character in New Zealand. We don't have them at all.
Some would argue Paul Henry.
No, I don't think that's right.
Boy.
You see, I think he's exactly.
A very naughty
Paul
boy.
is naughty, and he gets away with things. And he likes to be naughty and has a funny little smile on his face which says, "Oh, I did that, and that was really naughty, and I got away with it."
Yes.
Interesting thing about Paul, when he was fronting Close-Up for a time, he was a completely different person. He doesn't come into this category. I'm not a huge fan of Paul, but he's not a shock jock like this.
OK. When does shock jockery, though, become hate speech, though? Because you have a scenario where you allow these comments to go a little bit further and a little bit further, and we've seen this to a certain degree with Michael Laws, and then suddenly there's a big comment or something really outrageous, and it's insightful as well. When does that occur? When does that crossover occur?
Michael Laws was the case where he criticised the parents of a child who died in an accident. I think that is hate speech. I think that's so offensive and so hurtful. No, it's not inciting people to riot, but when you're attacking people at that sort of level, I think it is completely unacceptable.
But it's also highly generalised, you see. Michael Laws describes a whole group of New Zealand people as ferals.
Yes.
I find that utterly and absolutely offensive. He talks about the need possibly to sterilise women who are on the benefit. That is hate speech to me.
But he's still on air.
Yes, because
Why?
Because it has an audience. That sort of speech has an audience all around the world.
Maybe he's got a great contract and they can't get rid of him. I don't know.
Who could say? It is extraordinary, though. You do endorse, as you say, it is largely men. I'm not sure women, Susan, could get away with being quite so outrageous.
Oh, different rules for women completely. I mean, you notice the attacks on Julia Gillard. Quite a different level of attack. It gets personal on women. Helen Clark had a bit of it. There was a lot of whispering behind the scenes. There are just different ways that men are attacked and women are attacked. A strong woman interviewer, you're a bitch. If you're a man, you'd be a strong interviewer. You're not a bitch, but you know what I mean. That's the way. Women are either wimps or bitches. Men, you're a strong, dominant male, and it's all good.
But the other side of the coin, can you imagine a woman doing the sort of thing that Jones has just done?
No.
No, neither can I.
No.
OK, let's have a look at another issue that we've been looking at this week. The performance of Labour leader David Shearer on our programme last weekend. First, let's look at how David Shearer answered the question as to whether the Labour Party still stood for its founding values, and that is that the wealth of the society should be distributed from each according to their abilities to each according to their needs. This was how Mr Shearer responded.
There's no problem there. Our welfare system is based on a social contract. The social contract works. You know, you work, you pay your taxes, and then when you need it, you lose your job, you have an accident, the state looks after you. As soon as you're able to get back onto your feet again, their expectation is that you go back and you start paying your way again. That's the social contract. Now
we're going to come out of it there. A few weeks earlier, we asked David Cunliffe exactly the same question. Here is how he responded.
Yes, I do. I think it's a guiding philosophy for us, and what do we want? We want a society that's fair, that's equitable, where every Kiwi kid gets the chance to make the best of themselves and their lives, and every family can blossom. We want a sustainable environment where we continue to be a place where smart people want to live, and we want a prosperous and productive economy that can, deliver a good wage or a good salary to all Kiwi families.
Said with a smile. Brian Edwards, what do you make of those two responses?
Well, actually, both of these men have their problems. David Shearer's problem is that he's largely incoherent when he speaks. And that is a real difficulty. For someone who wants to be the leader of the country, wants to be the Prime Minister, to stammer and stutter his way through interviews, and the piece you showed is by no means the worst from that interview, you were here and you know about it, is not acceptable. I mean, people think that the person who will be Prime Minister will be running the country. And so you look at David Shearer and you say, can I really imagine this man running the country? Now, of course, David Cunliffe has his problems as well, because people look at him and there's something about him that bothers them, you know? They think, I don't know what it is. Is he too slick? Is he a bit slimy? What is it? But he's enormously coherent. He's absolutely fluent. He is a master of every topic that he has, and he's brilliant in debate. So you pay your money and you take your pick.
But he just doesn't appeal. There's something, unappealing that you kind of go, I'm talking about Cunliffe. Yeah. There's something about him and you just kind of go, I'm not sure about him. He's not particularly popular amongst his own. There is just something about him in the way, he presents very well, he speaks very well, but you just sort of think, I don't know. Two problems I think that David Shearer has. He can't master the soundbite. And you need to be able to get a few words out that are slick, that are smart, that mean something.
Coherence,
no, you can't teach that, because to fix David Shearer, you would have to meddle with his brain. And you can't do that. I'm not saying he hasn't got a brain, but I'm saying you can't meddle with it. This is part of his DNA, the way he is, the way he behaves. His other problem, of course, is that he's had no real apprenticeship in politics in New Zealand. If you look at Helen Clark was 12 years in Parliament before she became Leader of the Opposition, 18 years before she became Prime Minister. He's been there a couple of years. He doesn't know the ropes.
Right.
The other
thing
is...
it hasn't mattered for John Key. He didn't know the ropes. He had a short-term apprenticeship as well, and he has mastered it. He's managed to be likeable. I think one of the problems Labour has with Shearer is they've tried to out-Key with Shearer.
That's probably
so
true.
let's have a nice man there, and it's just
Shearer's
not
popular
working.
with women, whereas
he's
Key's losing some support for women. What do you make of that?
Well, I think the Prime Minister's had a very challenging year. And I think he looks at the moment to be a bit over it, a bit checked out, a bit disinterested. And one of John Key's greatest strengths is that he rolled with the punches. You'd throw a hard question at him, he'd smile, he'd deal with it. Yeah. He never took it personally. He's not got a nasty bone in his body, but at the moment I think he looks a little defensive and a little checked out.
Well, my wife, who's studying politics, tells me that you can fit David Shearer into a category of negative-passive or passive-negative. And what this apparently means is he doesn't look as though he has any energy, first of all. He seems to be lacking in energy. And the other thing is he doesn't look as though he's enjoying the job. He's a reluctant politician, if you like. Now, what's happening, I think, what you say about the current Prime Minister is very interesting indeed, about John Key. He's starting to look grumpy.
Yep.
He's not dealing well with situations. His energy has gone as well. And so I think he's over it, actually.
I had a drink this week with the 4 journalists sitting there. We, this week, had all had something to do with the Prime Minister. I'd interviewed him on radio. They'd seen him at different functions. So 4 different events. Each of us commented individually that he looked tired and he looked a little annoyed.
He's been pretty combative this year. He's got a lot coming into him.
Just coming back to Cunliffe for a moment, I think he's made one serious mistake. I did give him one piece of advice. He grew a beard, and I met him in the street. No, I met him in the street. I met him in the street, and I said, that really suits you, that beard. You look much better. And all those things you've talked about that bothered people about him, the beard seemed to conceal, if that's the word. And I think...
Just made him perhaps look a bit gruffer. But I don't know.
Well, gruffer might be better.
Yeah, possibly.
Isn't it interesting, though, in this life of television, which is so dominant and so important, how people look is so critical. I was thinking about it. I was watching the US election. I thought, when was the last time they had an American president who was bald?
Yeah, but you know, we work on impression.
It was 55 years ago.
As viewers, we work on impression.
Yes.
That's the main thing. We're like jurors. We look at the person in the dock and we say, there's a killer if ever I saw one. That may have nothing whatsoever to do with the evidence. Or we look at the other little old lady in the dock and we say, she couldn't possibly have knifed him 39 times. That's not possible. And that's how we operate to some extent with politicians.
OK, so just finally, what advice would you give to David Shearer? Should he head back and be a bit combative in an opposition role as opposed to the leadership role, or can you fix him?
I don't think you can do anything about it.
Susan?
Yeah, I think he is what he is.
Here's what he is. All right, that is where we will leave it. Susan Wood, broadcaster, and Brian Edwards, nice to see you back. Thank you both